We are with Brooke and Mich, and they are introducing us to their three amazing kids. So let's start there. Mom, can you just introduce us to your three kids? And let's go with one descriptive word for each. And you're going to be next, Dad, with a follow-up question. So it may or may not be the same one.
So Zachary is 14, and he is very steadfast.
Oh, good word.
Yeah. Amelia is 11 and a half, and she would very much be mad if I forgot the half, and she is our creative child. And then Luke is 7, and he is just full of life.
All right, Dad. One thing that you've learned from each of your kids.
With Zach, it was patience. With Amelia, it was patience. And with Luke, it was patience.
That's great.
A triple dose.
Yeah. No.
Zach spoiled us.
Yeah, Zach really did spoil us. I think with Zach, I've learned to give a little leash with how much he's capable of doing. I don't necessarily have to be there to hold his hand through every part of it. With Amelia, yeah, she's definitely taught me patience. No, she's great. She's definitely taught me how to choose my battles wisely.
That's a girl. That's a daughter thing too.
Yeah. And with Luke has kept me young for sure. Luke has kept me energetic and trying to keep up with him because he's a lot.
I want to answer that one. Amelia definitely taught us to find the beauty in things, to stop and to look for it. And then Luke has definitely taught me to let go and just have fun.
Today we are in Foley, Alabama, engaging in a conversation that really packs a punch of openness and authenticity and a few laughs along the way. My name is Seth Carnell, and this is the Go Shout Love podcast. This episode surrounds a family who truly treads through the weeds of a medical journey together and does so with faith, hope, and love. We are talking to Mich and Brooke, the parents of 3 kids, Zachary, who is 14 years old, Amelia, who is 11, and Luke, who is 7, all of which who share the same diagnosis of MPS I. Now, MPS I, or Hurler syndrome, is a rare genetic disorder that occurs in approximately 1 in 100,000 newborns. There is so much more about this diagnosis that Mich and Brooke will tell you about, including the discovery of it, the odds of all 3 of their kids having it, and what it means for their children and other children with this diagnosis. I'm not going to lie, there are some valuable insights that we wouldn't have unless we have conversations like this one, including the importance of newborn screening. Now, what shouldn't be lost in all of this, however, is how these parents describe their kids' personalities and relationships with one another. It is extremely endearing, and I hope you enjoy hearing about it just as much as we enjoyed recording it. Not only will you get to hear from the parents about these kids, but later in this month, we will have an additional bonus episode where you will get to hear from the children themselves. This is a privilege we don't always get, and we want you to have the chance to hear from these incredible children firsthand. In this conversation with Mich and Brooke is Josh Veach, our Executive Director of Go Shout Love, and Jessica Santo, our Family Relations Director and talented photographer. Please take a second to rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you are listening on, and please share with a friend. More than anything, we want these stories to be heard and shared.
So how do you guys face having 3 children on a medical journey? What does that look like for you guys each day as parents to get up and to do that?
Well, considering we do not have any children without,
Yeah.
so it's pretty normal for us.
Yeah.
We've never. All three of them have the only ones we have. That's the only way we know.
A better question then would be, what would you say to parents who are at the starting gate of it?
So happiness is a choice a lot of times. We could choose to give in to the fear or the sadness, or we could choose to find ways to get through it and to make our lives, the best and make their lives the best that we can. And not to sound trite when I say that at all, because sometimes that choice is getting the help that you need as a parent, as a rare parent. But yeah, it's some days I want to just lay in the bed and cry, when my friends' kids are making middle school cheerleader or, on playing basketball and all these things, and that, my kids can't do, but I can choose to see the goodness that's come out of the life that we do lead. Like, I get to meet you guys, or all the amazing people that we've met, friends that we have, that we would have no idea that this world even existed. All the goodness, it's there. You just have to look for it sometimes.
Yeah, you can't fold the cards you're dealt. You've got to play them and make the best out of it.
That's a good analogy.
That is
I'm
a
gonna
good
steal
analogy.
that. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, and you run your own race, and that's what our family is doing. And we're in our lane, and we go as fast or as slow as we need to go. But core values of life can be taught, and that's kindness and love. And if our kids can show that to others, then I think that we've successfully done our job as parents, regardless of any other abilities or disabilities.
Yep. We depend a lot on our faith to get us through too.
Yes.
And however that may look for different people, we always encourage people to find that within them. Because, and I tell newly diagnosed parents when they're getting ready to go to transplant, like, you better find your God, whichever one, because there's going to be some nights that it's just you and them there in the hospital room.
How did you, and if this is too personal, please say so, and we'll cut it. But what has there been times where you've had to wrestle in your faith about a good God in a really difficult season? And I guess the simplest way that we all wrestle with that is good things or bad things happening to good people is the simplest way that most people probably think about that. But when you are in the room and it's just you and your thoughts and taking that to God, like what did that look like for you?
Absolutely. We wrestle with that. Often for me, it's been knowing in my faith and my belief that you can't have goodness and wholeness and truth without suffering, right? You can't have a rainbow without the thunderstorm. And so balancing that and how, and sometimes I don't have an answer. Sometimes I just have to have faith that there is a purpose, and my brain may not understand it and may never understand it here, but it gets me through the day believing that it is for a reason, even if I can't see it. So my Meemaw is a very praying woman. She always says that if everyone threw all their troubles into one big fire, you would run and grab your own right back out, right? So we have this hand that we're dealt with our family, with our kids, but we also don't have some of the problems that other people, may have. And so it's just recognizing the good for what it is and persevering through the hard times.
Dad, how are you doing with all of that?
The end game for my life or for the kids is not in my hands. And as long as I can teach them that there is goodness in the world despite the bad, and strive to see it myself, I think when that time comes, it's again out of my hands and hopefully placed in the right hands. So day by day, I guess you could say, look for the goodness out of every day as best you can. I know some days are tough. Know that suffering, whether it be your family, our family, the child that you love, or family members going through the same thing, friends going through the same thing, their struggles are there to be light to other things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important thing that we try to teach the kids and try to remember ourselves is like, how can we help others around us? How can we be a light for other people?
You ought to see Zach. Anytime we're at events, he's never still. He's never sitting down and just going to eat his plate of, whatever and play with the kids. He's grabbing a trash bag and talking to the adult volunteers and making sure that tables are wiped down.
He's setting his political campaign up.
Well, so he
shaking hands.
His nickname was
babies.
the governor of Ronald McDonald House because he was so young. He was like 8, and he knew because we all come down for dinner at night together. And a lot of times the child's not there, they're inpatient. And so, but he knew, and he would walk up to you and he'd say, hi, how is, and he would say the child's name. How are they doing today? Did they see the doctor today? Are they still sick? And he would shake their hand. And, he's like that.
Any new families that would come to the house, the staff would go find Zach and have him escort them and show them around.
So we, social media gets a bad rap a lot, but when
it doesn't with Go Shout Love.
No.
I'm meaning that families, when we sit down and record these podcasts, they have a lot of good things to say about social media.
Well, it's so helpful. So when Zach was first initially not like unofficially diagnosed, our pediatrician said, I think he has MPS 1. Do not go home and Google it. Okay. So the first thing you do is go home and Google it, right? And it's awful. It's like outdated information. It's terrible. So one of our goals and mine, especially was how can I be a force for good for these newly diagnosed parents? How can our story help someone else? So can we show like, okay, yes, you have this terrible diagnosis, but this is all the good that can come from it. So like, that's why I put my kids' pictures on social media and I, try to share all the good things that happen, not to diminish the hard stuff that they go through, but just to show other families like, yeah, your life is going to look a little different, but it can still be really great.
What Josh and I learned on the way down here, we were doing a little research that each of your children had a 1 in 4 chance of having MPS 1, and all 3 of your children have that. So you were explaining explain that one more time, this little beautiful. What is this called?
A Punnett square.
A Punnett square.
Yeah, so just like
It's
in
very
your,
interesting.
your high school biology class, if if one of the parents has blue eyes and then you're trying to figure out which one is, but brown eyes are dominant. So our kids would have a 25% chance of not having the disease, a 25% chance of having the disease, or a 50% chance of being a carrier for the disease, which is what Mitch and I are both carriers. So we actually have the same mutation, and it's a very common one. You wear your mutation of your gene in our world, like your shoe size, basically, like, oh yeah, what mutation are you? But there are actually only 2 other families in the continental U.S. that have 3 living children with our disease.
So when you say it's a common mutation, what do you mean by that?
So there's, okay, I'm not super sciencey, but there's just different ways that copy of that gene can be mutated, or which gene it is that's mutated. And I hate that word mutated, right? But and I don't want to say defective either. But so it can be different genes and different copies that would cause the disease to happen. So we are the first in our families. And that's typically because a lot of times these are diseases that wouldn't have survived past infancy, even, 30, 35 years ago. But with the advancement of NICUs and neonatology care, that now they've lived longer. So, we might have, and they just chalked it up to, the baby died. They didn't really know a cause. But then, so we found out, Mitch got a call one day, 9 years ago.
Yeah, got a call from a distant cousin of mine that I'd met a few times at family reunions, and I knew who she was. And she called me and said, "Hey, this is your cousin, and my son just got diagnosed with Hurler syndrome." Wow. And so we immediately assumed that our connecting relatives, the O'Dwyer line of my grandmother.
So their grandmothers were sisters, this cousin and Mitch's grandmother.
Yeah, and so we just said, well, that's got to be where the line that it comes from, at least for my family. And she, come to find out,
then it
does not have the same mutation, so it's not through that side of the family.
This family relative, so it was not Hurler syndrome.
It is Hurler
It is.
syndrome.
A different mutation.
Different mutation to cause the disease. Yeah.
So what does that mean exactly? I'm a little confused. So they have it, but it's a different mutation.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm going to vaguely say, because I don't know, that I'm assuming whatever mutation it is caused the enzyme cause
the body to not produce the enzyme.
Exactly. Thank you.
And that's terrible. Like, you can cut all this part out, because I should know how many different mutations there are for our disease. But for most of these diseases, there are multiple mutations that could cause the inheritance of it. That's really common.
But on the practical side, basically that means there's at least 2 versions in your family line, right?
I would assume so.
It actually means that they didn't inherit it from their common ancestor.
Right.
So she probably inherited it from her mother's side, and he probably inherited it from his mother's side versus their father's shared side.
Fascinating.
It's like she did the math because she's way smarter than me, but it's like a 1 in 5 billion chance of having a distant relative with the same disease,
but
and then not even the same mutation. Yeah. So she and her husband have the same mutation. Mitch and I have the same mutation.
It's winning the type of lottery that you don't sign up to play.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. For sure. Yeah.
But now we have this awesome family in our lives. She and I just went on a girls' trip together a couple of weekends ago. So now, they live in Delaware. We would have probably never met them.
And how old is their child?
9.
9.
Stephanie, I really hope he's 9 because I can't remember.
9-ish, somewhere in the 9 range.
Younger than Amelia.
Is he on the kind of the same path in the journey as you're so different?
So our kids we're very, very fortunate. Our kids are much less affected by the disease than most children. Our primary issues are orthopedic. We have some mild developmental delays, nothing as severe as most of the kids face. Zach has a little bit of cardiac involvement, but we're still like in a watch and see, but he will have to have some intervention with that in the future. But, you know, a lot of kids are severely cognitively delayed. Many of our kids also have many of the kids with our disease have a dual diagnosis of autism. And so our kids have none of that.
And the hope with that, with the, you know, things like with the newborn screening that we're doing, the hope is to earlier intervention will prevent some of these severities taking place.
How hard is it to get a newborn screening passed?
So when we say newborn screening, we're talking about like the heel stick cards when the baby's born. So most of people just think of it as a PKU test. That actually started in the 60s with PKU. And it is, I'll just bring out all my talking points. It is the most successful public health program in the country, right? So the way it works is the federal government comes out with a recommended screening panel. It is a years-long process to have a disease added to the federal guidelines. I mean, and oftentimes advocacy groups have to apply like several times because you have to prove, you know, without any kind of doubt that it is more cost effective to screen every baby born at birth than to wait until these diagnoses go untreated years down. And there has to be, you know, an easy test that the public health labs can do to screen the babies. And there has to be some sort of treatment, right? They're not going to screen all these babies just so you know you have the disease. So the Department of Health and Human Services puts out this guideline, and then it's up to the states essentially to primarily fund, coordinate, operate their own newborn screening programs. And there's a big push in the rare disease world. It's been a big deal for the last couple of years because we've had some stuff going on at the federal level. And of course, COVID put a damper on a lot of things. But what we're finding, especially in our state, is that the poorer states, it's taking, you know, upwards 5 to 8 years after these diseases are added to the federal panel for it to actually be enforced on the state level. So our disease was added to the federal guidelines in 2016, and Alabama's still not screening for it. We're getting close to 40 states now are at or near or plan to be at parity with the federal guidelines, you know, within the next few years. So we're getting there.
So is that when it's added, is that a requirement that states comply?
Nope.
It's just a recommendation.
It's just a recommendation.
So some might jump on it and
and you can, I mean, you can
and
guess the states that do, right? So the
Yep.
coasts,
Yep.
obviously.
they have colors that go with them.
Yep. Minnesota is always at the forefront of things like that. So we're lucky that we receive all of our care. So we have a lot of connections in Minnesota. So that's helped us some here. And then even now, so like Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida, and Texas are all on their way. And so we're just trying
They're
to
hoping for some peer pressure.
Yeah, we're trying to keep Alabama from being last.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what does that look like for your involvement?
And Zachary's too, because
Yeah.
he's involved as well.
Yeah, so Zach loves to share his story with our legislators. He's done that for many years at the federal and the state level. He and our U.S. representative are on a first name basis with each other. But yeah, so we are a part of an organization, a rare disease organization in the state. And we essentially have drafted state legislation. We have a bill. Zachary doesn't know it yet, but the bill's actually going to be named after him.
Oh, wow.
So we have that draft legislation, and now we're working with all of the different stakeholders within the state to get everyone's agreement on our bill so that we can put it up for a vote in the legislature. Yeah, but we want to do, the hard work on the back end to make sure that, the insurance companies and Medicaid and
That there's a path to implement it?
yeah. So it would be, creating a timeline so that these diseases aren't going years without, and we're missing, 50,000 babies. There are 7 kids in Alabama that we know of with our disease, which is kind of surprising. I mean, that's a lot for a small population as we have. But we always say that all of this advocacy and newborn screening work that we do, that's for the friends we haven't met yet, right? Like none of this is going to help us and help
Right.
the friends we already know, but it's for the people that we don't know.
What a great perspective.
That is a great perspective.
I will cry. I remember the first kid that I actually knew and got to meet that had been diagnosed in another state from newborn screening, and his family came down to visit at the beach, and I just held him in my arms and I just cried because his prognosis, his outlook, his life expectancy is just incredible compared to what it could have been if it wasn't for this awesome just simple heel stick.
Yeah. Can we talk about what intervention has looked like for you guys, and then how that has changed over time, even for that, that child? Like how is that outlook different now because of the interventions available?
Yep. So standard of care with our disease right now is after your initial diagnosis, most medical facilities will advise you to start. We have an artificial enzyme that is given intravenously. It's about like a 5-6 hour infusion, and it's weekly. So 15, 20 years ago, that was enormous, and we got to meet the families that paved the way for that. We've actually gotten to meet the physician researcher who developed that, which is amazing. But yeah, so you start those weekly, we call it ERT, enzyme replacement therapy. Start that process while they're looking for a match, and then a bone marrow transplant or a cord blood. We had unrelated stem cell transplant is the standard of care. So with that, so with our family, we were living in Texarkana, Arkansas at the time. So our diagnosing geneticist said, if this was my kid, then I would go to the University of Minnesota, which we're thankful that we had a geneticist that would tell us that, because we had no idea. So we're doing weekly enzyme replacement therapies while they look for a donor, because ideally they want an unrelated donor, not a family one that would carry the defective gene. So we had cord blood, and then it is about a month of chemo before. So full chemo, they have to totally destroy the kids' immune systems. So then you're waiting for transplant day, and it's backwards counting. You start at negative day minus 30, right? And you're counting down, and then transplant day is day 0, right? And it's so anticlimactic because it's just like a blood transfusion. It's not they make it as special as they can, but and so that's the easy part. And then once you start counting upwards after day 0 is when it gets hard, because that's when the effects of the chemo really happen. So we're in Minnesota. You have to plan to be there for at least 100 days post transplant, wherever your facility is. So you've already been there like a month, and then another 100 days post
And
transplant.
did your 3 kids do this all at the same time?
No. So the goal with our disease is to be diagnosed and begin treatment and transplant as early as absolutely possible. So with Zachary, we didn't know. He was diagnosed at a year, and then he had some complications that pushed his transplant. He was a year and a half before he was transplanted. So then we actually found out we were expecting Amelia while we were there for Zach's transplant. So at that time, which was almost 11 years ago, diagnostics weren't as great, so they weren't transplanting kids as young. So I opted to wait. We opted to wait with Amelia. For one, we couldn't do her transplant. I just could not do it in the same calendar year as Zachary's. So we came home in May from Zach's transplant, and then we went back up the next year. So she was 8 months when she had her transplant, but she started enzyme replacement therapy like within her first 6 weeks. So we did weekly infusions until she was 8 months old. And that meant driving from Texarkana to Little Rock every week, which is like a 2-hour drive one way. And we'd have to be there at like 8 o'clock in the morning because it's such a long infusion. But then by the time Luke came around, treatments had advanced and they had started transplanting much younger. So, he still went through the same process, chemo, transplant day, but the chemo, they're always trying to find the least aggressive form of chemo that will still get the job done for the kids. So Luke was actually, he had his stem cell transplant at 4 months old. And he still has his complications, but most of what he deals with is side effects from transplant, not the actual disease.
So you have 3 kids with pretty different journeys on this because of timing.
Yeah, we're a really good case study.
Technology and medical advancements.
Yeah, medical advancements.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And some of their similarities were there, or they had some similarities through. I don't know. I'm not saying that right. They followed the same path to some degree, right? So especially the boys, they both had some of the same really standard transplant complications. Mm-hmm. Amelia, she did have one pretty major transplant complication. Her body basically just stopped producing platelets at one point post-transplant, and she couldn't keep up. And we were beginning to get to, oh no, this is a real problem. And then just like her little light switch came on and she just started making her platelets again.
You described it to me on a phone call. I need to, maybe you can help me with this. But you see the human body like in a drawing or on TV, and you see the molecules and the cells like running through your body, right? Is that what?
No, so I'm the trash can person, taking your recycling out. That's how our disease works.
Okay, explain that to me.
So the way the disease works, they're missing one enzyme that breaks down waste in the lysosomes of the cell. So that's what the lysosome does in your cell, is it like recycles cellular waste. So another MPS mom came up with the best way to describe it is like, imagine if your recycling truck stopped coming to your house. Like for a while, you'll just put it in the garage and you're fine. And then eventually your garage will get too full. And so you'll have to move into like your laundry room, and then that will get full. And then you're like shoving your recycling into your closets, and eventually it's just going to take over your whole house, right? And you can't do anything. So that's how it is in their bodies, which is why
with every cell.
Yeah, every
So
cell,
every
every
cell
system.
and the millions of cells that you have and are making that is happening. So that waste is not getting broke down because the enzyme is not there to break it down.
So it turns into, it's this impossibly long word, so everyone just calls it gags, and it's like mucusy sludge in their body. And so that's when the kids were talking about that they had their hand surgeries before.
Yeah, because they talked a lot about some upcoming surgeries.
Yep.
So they're facing this as well as the chemo and the transplants that you guys were doing. This is a big part of their journey.
Yes, especially for our kids, it's orthopedic. So they were talking about their hands, and what happens is, for some reason, that the gags like to gather in the tunnel. So if you think of like your carpal tunnel going into your hand where that nerve is, that the gag likes to gather there for some reason, and it starts to press on that nerve going into your hand.
The more it forms and the more it squeezes on these tendons and things, you tend to...
Yeah, you shrink up. So they go in and they scrape it out of the tunnel.
So is that a pretty instant relief for them?
Yeah, I think so.
And is that something that they'll have to do more, like, on more than one occasion?
So the hope is no. And there's a lot of things with this disease that they can't really figure out. Like, it doesn't always make sense. So in the past, the doctors, like when Zach and Amelia had their surgeries done, the doctors would always say like, no, for some reason this doesn't happen again. But now they're finding, as more kids are living longer with our disease, that it might happen again.
Yeah.
We're hopeful not. So the other orthopedic stuff that we have coming up is more of just bone deformities that occur because of the disease. And so we do the transplant so that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, because the enzyme infusions don't do that. But for some reason, even a transplant doesn't help with our orthopedic issues. And that's pretty standard across the board for kids with MPS. And that's why, like, even Luke, who was diagnosed and treated so much earlier, he still is going to have some of those problems.
So, and I think, I just want to make sure I'm following correctly. I think what you're saying then is with the transplant is it's introducing the enzyme that's going to do the work for in the cells.
Right.
That's going to take the trash out.
Yep.
That wasn't working before. So
Yep.
you get healthy enzymes introduced into the body to start doing the job, which then doesn't reverse any things that's happened, but hopefully keeps things from getting worse.
Yep,
and progressing.
exactly. Yep, exactly. So it gets the kids to produce an adequate amount of enzymes.
Yep.
So
Well,
still not a whole lot.
Well, they have to do this again.
The hope is no. It does happen sometimes where, for some reason people's transplants fail over years. And then no, I don't want to say that because I don't want the kids to hear that. We do have one kid that is possible. And that's something that you would just have to measure out with quality of life. Like if you want to go, because the transplants come with a decent mortality rate, just the actual chemo and transplant itself. Mm-hmm. So that's something that you really have to weigh.
For each one of these transplants to happen, there had to be a donor.
Yep.
And so I'm curious if your position or how you guys feel about, that's bone marrow transplants or donation, right?
So ours was cord blood.
Okay.
And it depends on different diseases use different types of stem cells. So like some of the leukemias and stuff, they want a living donor. Our hospital prefers cord blood donation. It's just like if you had a baby,
right,
you can just donate your cord blood to Be the Match is who found ours, and they just bank it until it runs through their system and it's a hit. Yeah, so it's
I wish I would have known that for every baby that I had, my 3. I mean, that would be...
Yeah, it's amazing. Like,
we're not educated enough on, I mean, you're giving that option, that paper, do you want to do this? And you're kind of like, what is this?
I have no idea. Yeah.
But to know that it could
and so with a lot of diseases too, you also can privately bank your own kids' cord blood. And like I said, for some of the forms of cancer, they do want like a sibling match that doesn't have that. So you know, that's helpful too. We know the gender and the year that each of our kids' donors were born. I would never want to get anyone in trouble, so I'll try to say it. I do know the state that one of our kids' donors was born in, and that's just because we had the same person looking. She found all three. She worked behind the scenes, and she's actually the person that found all three of our kids' matches. And so she's like, I can't tell you where they're from, but it's really close to you, kind of thing. But yeah, so, and a lot of them, especially with the living donors, like they have a relationship. You can have a relationship with your donor, but unfortunately, ours is totally de-identified. So we don't know who those people are, but we remember them and their moms in our prayers a lot.
It's fascinating to think about that there's these three random kids that are growing up now, that your life looks different because of that choice that mom made.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, easy choice, right? I mean, it's just medical waste. It's just going to go in the trash but you can, you know, save someone's life.
Man. Nice.
I'm not going to cry.
You can.
I cry a lot.
It's all right.
So what does kind of maintenance maybe isn't the right word, but everyday life now that you've got, I mean, that obviously that phase was significant for all three kids to go through the chemo and transplant. What does the day-to-day life look like now, and how does the disease still impact day-to-day life? And in what ways have the interventions kind of helped create a different type of normal maybe?
So we do still have, maintenance is a great word to use because that's what we oftentimes call it. Now that the transplant's over, we are maintenancing. And orthopedic issues are probably our biggest hurdles. The kids get tired. The faster than other kids, their bones hurt. It's not a muscle pain. They just, walking around all day at a park will really put them out.
Yeah, we'll have to carry them inside from the car.
Yeah.
And then they'll be down all the next day.
Yeah.
And they can't do 2 strenuous days in a row.
Right. And we definitely utilize as many wheelchairs and walkers and things like that as best we can.
Well, and as much as 11 and 14-year-olds want. It's hard. We fall in that middle gap, So probably the biggest impact, two. So we have to travel to Minnesota every year, or we choose to travel to Minnesota because it's a rare disease center of excellence, and we see 14 different specialists in Minnesota. So we are trying to transfer some of those to Birmingham, which would be a 4-hour drive instead of an 18-hour drive. So that's a big impact on our family because people ask, well, where are y'all going on summer vacation? Well, we're going to Minnesota for summer vacation, right? And then the big life change for us that sets us apart is we choose to homeschool our kids. And one of the primary reasons for that is because Zach would come home from 2nd grade and his school was great, but his campus was just huge. And he would be in bed the rest of the day. And Mich and I just decided, we already have an expectancy here. We don't want to waste it. For one, being away from them all day, right? And then, for him to just be exhausted and not have any fun outside of that. So we made that choice, and lots of sacrifices that come with that to homeschool, which ended up being a huge blessing for us. we were able to find a really great community that's supportive of the kids. We had homeschool field day last week, and Zach insisted on running I don't remember how far it was, but he insisted on running the race, right? And so he got lapped. I was just proud of him for finishing. Yeah. I thought that was amazing that he was going to finish, and 2 of the boys like ran back with him and finished with him, and it wasn't in like it was just in a friendship, it was just boys being friends, and so we're really lucky in that.
Were you able to hold it together for that?
No.
I don't think I would have been.
No, not at all.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Dad, how has each child's perspective helped you be strong during all of this in your journey with them? Because I'm sure each of them they bring their own little gusto to this.
Yeah. Zach learned a long time ago that it's easier to rip the Band-Aid off. Let's get it over with. Like he said earlier with surgery, he's just ready to get it over with so that he can start recovering and get back on his feet. With Zach, there is a bit of determination to get through it, and he's very level-headed. Mm-hmm. With Amelia, she is much more tender, and so you have to really hold her hand through the process and keep reassuring her, and that gets tough because there's only so many things you can say, and I guess Zach probably gets a little bit of his level-headedness from me because I have a tendency to just, it's okay, let's get through this, and then it'll be over. With Luke, his innocence is still there a little bit. He's one of these, you can stick a lollipop in his mouth and give him a shot at the same time, and he doesn't know that something went wrong. So I don't know. We're still learning with Luke, for sure.
Yeah.
Do they help each other through their pain or their things that they're going through?
They do. Zach really shows the little kids how to
be brave,
act, be brave,
keep calm and carry on. Really.
Keep calm and carry on, and certainly him.
You guys had a lot of really great things to say.
We had a lot of things to say. I'm sorry.
No, it's great.
It didn't go to.
Was there anything that we didn't cover that you guys would like to talk about or wish we had talked about?
Newborn screening.
Is there anything that we can do to help get that done for you guys? Is there anything that we can email, any emails or anything that we can do?
September is National Newborn Screening Awareness Month. I'm not sure. You guys are both in Missouri. Mm-hmm. I'll have to look and see where Missouri falls. We're actually really excited to live in a state that we do get to be at the forefront of these kinds of things, and that that we can be there to help make a lot of the changes that need to be made. We love living here. We love our community and the people. So it's exciting to see how we can improve, for the next generation. So we would always encourage everyone you can register for Be the Match, and as an adult, they'll send you like a swab, and I'm sure y'all have shared this before. And then also to look into cord blood donation. If you can go to the Every Life Foundation, and they have an interactive map that can show you, you can click on your state and it shows you which diseases are missing that are on the federal recommendations that your state is not. In that case, I would advocate for you to write your congressman, your state, not federal, legislators, and find out why, see if they even know, because most of them have no idea what newborn screening is, just like everyone else. And I mean, I think for everyone we say, like, just get to know your legislator. Like, they're just people.
At Go Shout Love, we do amazing things for amazing families with kids on rare medical journeys. Each month, we shout love for families through the sale of creative apparel inspired by the kids. This month's Do Small Things with Great Love design is inspired by a trio of siblings from Foley, Alabama, Zachary, Amelia, and Luke, who share a special bond but also a rare medical diagnosis. Every purchase in June will be used to help with the travel expenses to Minnesota for surgeries for the kids. Visit our website at goshout.love to support Zachary, Amelia, and Luke through the purchase of a t-shirt, hat, tank top, hoodie, or other items.